Hello everyone, welcome to our brand new series of the Facebook Lives Travel Chats with Thelma and Louise. It's been almost a year since we started our first series down in April 2020 during lockdown 1. Here we are, January 2021. Pretty much the same situation. You can see that time means nothing now, but there is hope on the horizon. There's a vaccine being administered as we speak. And we thought it was about time to bring back a new series of our live chats. And this time we're going to be focused on getting you all back on the road as soon as it's safe. So with that in mind, we've got some fantastic guests and topic lined up for you. And Anna's going to introduce our first guest for you right now.
Yes, hi everyone. Our first guest is Barbara Weibel, a blogger from Hole in the Donut. And she is joining us today from Chiang Mai, Thailand. And because of the time difference, we had to record our chat today. Barbara started full-time travel at the age of 54. That was back in 2007. And she's going strong, well, whenever the pandemic allows it to. So today we talked to Barbara about her Lyme disease and what gave her the confidence to dedicate her life to things that she really enjoys, like travel, writing, and photography. Here she comes now. Hello, Barbara. Oh,
hello.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Welcome. Barbara, this was about 14 years ago that you completely changed your life. Please tell us, how did it all started?
Well, I had spent about 36 years in corporate life in a variety of different industries. And frankly, I hated my life. I didn't like any of my jobs. But, you know, when you're younger and you want to, you're anxious to get on with your life and start a career. And I went out and got my first job and sort of forgot what it was I'd really wanted to do. And then gradually you sort of get trapped in that because you've got a mortgage payment and a car payment and insurance, and you start wanting stuff. And I did that for 36 years and continued to be miserable. And I would go through bouts where I would burn out and I would walk away from whatever career I had going and promise myself I'd never do it again. And then the fear would set in, and I, how am I going to make the mortgage payment? How am I going to make the car payment? I'm never going to get another job as good as that one. So when someone offered me another job that was a good one, I immediately jumped in and took it. And the whole cycle started all over again. And I did that for so long, over and over and over again, like backing up a car and going at a wall and crashing into it each time, until I finally got the Lyme disease. And it was about 5 years before they were able to diagnose me. So by the time they found it, because I had negative tests and everything, but it was just false negatives. And by the time they found it, I was pretty sick. I had neurological problems. And I promised myself at that point that if I could get well, because I didn't think it was possible. I was looking death in the face, and that's what finally kicked me out of my complacency. I thought, what good is all this money and all this stuff that I acquire if I'm never going to be able to do the things that I love, that I always wanted to do? So I promised myself that if I could recover, I would walk away from the job and put a backpack on and go out and try and recreate myself as a travel writer.
Right.
So that was more of a New Year resolution. I mean, because it's quite strong to, come out the other side of a disease and actually stick to the promise of doing the things you enjoy.
It was very hard because it took me about a year to recover. I gave my boss, who's just a wonderful man, notice at the time. I was general manager of 4 Remix franchises with 60 agents and broker in charge, and had a real estate partnership of my own and a development company. And, I was working 80 hours a week. And I told him that I was going to leave a year ahead of time. And he didn't believe me, but he supported me. He thought I'd changed my mind. And that year rolled around, And we were in the midst of the 2008 financial crisis. I couldn't sell my home. I couldn't sell 2 other properties I had. And I had about, oh gosh, about $15,000 a month in mortgage payments.
Wow.
Not even considering the other financial responsibilities. And so this year rolled around and I thought, well, what are you going to do, Barbara? Are you going to be true to yourself this time? Or are you going to back that car up again and go 100 miles an hour toward the wall?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I can't do it again. I can't. No matter what happens, I have to be true to myself and try this. So that's how it happened.
So do you think that anything else could have driven you to actually make that change, or did it have to take a chronic illness?
I'll tell you how I don't think anything else would have. I think it had to be something that's serious, because I had always, from the time I was 11 years old, and my uncle gave me an old Leica camera when I was 11. And from the moment I had it in my hot little hands, I was fascinated by photography. And then a couple years later, maybe, my dad was a milkman. Somebody gave him a subscription to National Geographic.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the days when you couldn't just sign up. You had to be gifted by someone. And he was so amazed by that magazine that he wouldn't throw a single issue out. So they piled up in the front hall. And I would come home from school and do my homework and then immediately go to the front hall and sit on the floor and look through those magazines. And that's, you know, I must have been 13, 14 maybe at the time. And that's where I got my passion for the idea of I want to be a photojournalist, or I want to be a travel writer or something. I'd always known that. But over the years, when you kind of get trapped in that corporate life because you have to pay the bills,
Mm-hmm.
then you lose sight. I seriously forgot what it was that I wanted to do, to the point where I would say to myself, each time I left a career, you know, if I knew what I wanted to do, I'd go out and do it, but I don't know. And then as I laid there in my sick bed with this Lyme disease, not knowing if I could recover, it all came flooding back to me one day. Well, Barbara, you've always known what it is you wanted to do. You want to do photography and travel and writing. And that's when I said, that's it. If I can get better, I'm going to go to the corporate world and I'm going to go do this. So I think it took that life-threatening experience for me to wake up and remember what my dreams were.
And did Lyme disease, are you completely recovered from Lyme disease? Can you completely recover from Lyme disease? Or did it come back to you whilst you were at any point? Or is it something that you're still dealing with now?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because there's so much about it that they don't know.
Right.
For instance, when I had it, a lot of people were in online forums complaining about what they called chronic Lyme disease. And the doctors were poo-pooing that. And they said there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. You just take 2 or 3 weeks of antibiotic and you're cured.
Mm-hmm.
Now they know that there's what's called an L form, or a 3rd stage of the Lyme disease, where it becomes larval and it insists in your large striated skeletal muscles, like in my case, left thigh, which is quite common. And it waits for the medicine to get clear of your body, and then it rehatches and starts all over again. So it keeps going and going and going. And I had an additional problem in that I was allergic to all the medicines that they could give me for it. So they put me on doxycycline because I'd not tried that one. And I had that for 6 weeks. And actually, that was when I was my sickest because I was suffering side effects from the medicine as well, and literally crawling between the bed and the bathroom. And it's hard to know if it's completely gone. They wanted to keep me on the doxycycline. I said no, because my body's shutting down. And I found a naturopath in Seattle. And I flew back and forth for a year and worked with her. And she was the one that cured me with natural remedies, or whatever you want to call them. I was on a whole slew of things. Yeah, so I think that I am I developed dyslexia. I developed short-term memory loss. I still have problem remembering a name of somebody who I've just met. And I still transpose letters and numbers, but I catch it. Physically, I'm in pretty good shape, although, it attacked my joints. So I've had to have something done with my knees. I had stem cell therapy done on them 5 years ago. And they're starting to kind of get weak again. And, how much of it is the Lyme? I can't really say.
Mm.
And I think today, we know so much more about diseases, or living in the pandemic. It just made us a little bit more tougher and looking at life. Do you think going through Lyme disease made you deal better with the pandemic? Was there something that prepared you for this time of?
I don't think so. I don't think the Lyme had anything to do with that. As a writer, I'm pretty much a loner. I mean, it sort of comes with the profession, as Hemingway would have told you. And it's not that I can't deal with people. I can be outgoing. I was on a tour today with 7 friends, but I didn't suffer the loneliness or the feeling that my life is so changed that it will never be the same again. And maybe part of that is that, when I hit the road, and I've been traveling for 14 years. 8 of those years was full time with no home base, just me and my suitcase wandering the world and going from city to city and country to country, week after week after week. And you learn to be extremely flexible. I think, if anything, the travel has prepared me for this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How did you plan this? Did you plan your trip, or where you went, or was it just a feeling of going here and then stopping in another place?
Initially, you mean?
Yes, yeah. Did you plan of, the first 3
Oh.
months of your trip, or?
Mind you, I'd only been out of, Americans tend to travel Canada, Mexico, or the Caribbean. And I'd only been overseas twice, once to Spain many years ago, and once to Thailand. It was one of the few overseas trips I'd done. So I won't say that I was fearful, because I'm kind of one of those people that doesn't have a lot of fear over much of anything. But I did plan it. So I bought a 6-month round the world ticket, which allows you to go, oh gosh, I think it was 86,000 miles maximum. You have to kind of keep going in the same direction. You can't backtrack and cross the ocean again. You have to cross the Atlantic and then cross the Pacific, or vice versa. And I did, in 6 months, 17 different countries. I made a list of all the places that I'd always wanted to go, and I did them all. God help me, I don't know how I did that.
Especially having just Lyme disease.
Well, no, it was a year, I had a year of recovery from it.
Yeah,
so
still, it must have, that's not the sort of illness that just disappears.
And halfway through the trip, I had one of those adjustable rate mortgages on my house, which I had on the market for a year, and couldn't sell it. And the LIBOR rate, the percentage of interest, doubled the loan payment. And here I am traveling the world thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I just kept paying that mortgage on an empty house. And you just have to have faith sometimes that things are going to work out, and trust yourself.
Did you ever at any point regret your decision? Because you talk about how stressful it was and how unfulfilling your life was in the corporate world. Right. But then you talk about going off traveling and moving between 17 countries in 6 months, and the stress of this unpaid, this huge mortgage that you've got to pay off at home. To a lot of our viewers, that might sound like a much more stressful situation than being at home and not being quite fulfilled in what you're doing.
I've never regretted it, not for one iota.
No.
Not a nanosecond, never. I made the right decision, and I was working in corporate life Well, basically, the last 10 years when I was in real estate, I was working 70 or 80 hours a week, and 7 days a week, certainly. And I was miserably unhappy. And I was working probably just as much in blogging, but deliriously happy because I was doing something that I loved. So there's a lot to be said for, there's different types of stress. Yes, I was under stress with the loans and all of that, but what's the worst that could happen? I mean, I could lose the house. Well, I wasn't living in it anyway. I just had faith that it was going to work out. This is going to sound maybe a little esoteric to you and maybe to a lot of your listeners as well, because this is something I hear from people all the time. Well, I can't do that because I've got responsibilities. I've got a mortgage. I've got, I mean, I can't leave my grandkids behind. I hear that one all the time. And there's always a litany of reasons why you can't do something. You can always find a reason not to do it. But if you're going to be true to yourself, you have to believe that you can create the life. If you can envision it, you can create it. And so I've done this numerous times in my life. I did it in corporate life where I envisioned what I wanted my life to be like, what job I wanted, etc. And if you can envision it down to the most minute detail, it will come into being. I believe that with all my heart because I've done it time and again. And so when people say, how did you do it? I say that. I say you have to have a clear vision of where you're going and what you really want. And secondly, I tell people that fear and faith can't exist in the same space. So if you stay in faith, you stay out of fear.
What about sorry, I know we were going on quite an esoteric level there, but to bring it right back down to a very practical level, like how difficult was it to travel with a long-term illness? And were there any difficulties with practical things such as getting insurance that people would maybe say, oh, I can't go traveling, I can't get insurance for it? How did you get around any issues like that?
I'm a very, I don't know what word to use. I don't want to say clever, resourceful. That would be a better word. Yeah. I'm very resourceful. And so I just always found a way to get things done. So right now, travel insurance for me is a bit different because I'm over 65 and a lot of places won't provide you with that. But there are companies out there that will do it. Taxes. My accountant set me up online. I send him the taxes electronically every year and he does them. Mail in the beginning when I still had snail mail. I used a forwarding service out of Florida. And when my mail came in, they were all, what is it called when the people who work in a place are insured? Can't think of it right now, but they would scan the mail, the envelope. So, and it would be a PDF. Go online and look at the envelope. And I could do one of four things. I could have them shred it, open it, and scan it, hold it for me, or forward it. And so I would just have them open all my mail, bonded. That's the word. They're bonded. So I didn't have to worry about account numbers or anything.
Okay.
And they would scan the mail and then send me the PDF by email. And I would just deal with it that way. Nowadays, of course, it's easier because everything's online.
Yeah.
I was able to do it, 14 years ago when those things weren't quite so easy. There's always a way.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question on Facebook from someone called Mary Allchurch. And she wrote, "Hi, Barbara. I have CFS arthritis and severe migraine, so very depleted energy. My question is, how can I fully experience countries that I visit? I'm not the sort to just sit on a beach." You got any advice for her?
Yeah, I actually saw that comment come in and I was so glad that she asked it because this is something I have had to deal with. So about 5 years ago, I've been going pretty well for a long time, and the Lyme disease had affected. It's an autoimmune disorder, so it attacks the joints a lot of times, and that's what happened to me. It attacked my knees, and then my knees started to get weaker over the years, and because of the knees were weak and the hips started to go. And I found that I really thought 5 years ago that my traveling days were over, because I could no longer, I had a hard time taking the train, for instance, in Europe, because you know how they schedule the trains. You have maybe 10 minutes between trains. You get off of one, you go down into the underground passageway, you come back up another track and catch a second train. And they schedule that quite close together, or you have to wait hours. And I could not, with my knees, get up and down those stairs in time to feel comfortable to, meet those schedules.
Yeah.
When I got to the big cities in Europe, especially, there's metros everywhere in the world, but I couldn't carry my luggage down the metros anymore. And I always sort of prided myself on traveling in a budget way, independently, rather than on a tour. And so, I'd get in at an airport. I would find the metro or the bus line, and travel that way till I get to my hotel. I had to accept the fact that I was going to have to change the way I traveled. So I allowed myself the luxury, I guess, of using a prepaid limo at the airport that would pick me up and take care of the luggage, and deliver me directly to the hotel door. And then I would, would have to make sure that I had a hotel that had an elevator, because a lot of the old hotels don't have elevators. And all of those things, I said at one point, I had a much higher appreciation for the things that a disabled person goes through, because even after I dumped the luggage, if I was going to take, for instance, a SkyTrain in Thailand, I had to find stations that had elevators, because I couldn't do the 3 stories of steps anymore. I had to find a different way to carry my equipment. I could no longer keep it on my back in a backpack, because it was just killing my neck. I have, the Lyme disease settled in this jawline as well. So I guess what I'm saying to her is there are ways to do it. In fact, there's a young man who I can't think of his last name. Corey is his first name, and he's in a wheelchair. And he's been interviewed recently by all the big stations, CNN, and they featured him as somebody who's been to all 7 continents, and he lives in a wheelchair. So I would say to, what was her name again? Mary, you can do this. You just have to go at your own pace. I used to be able to walk 8 or 9 hours without stopping. I don't do that anymore. I walk for 2 hours. I find a coffee shop. I sit down and I veg for an hour. And that has also allowed me to meet more local people. So the coffee shops are my haunt, because I meet local people. They tell me the things to forget about. It's too touristy, but you've got to see this. Nobody knows about it. And it's much, much easier to meet local people when you're going at a slower pace.
That's such a thinking about it. It sounds like you're advocating a change of mindset and accepting that this is the way you have to travel now, but that then brings with it a whole new bunch of benefits.
It does. And it's still hard for me, because, I've trekked in the Himalayas, and I can't do that anymore, because my knees are actually pretty good, because I had stem cell therapy done in Italy 5 years ago, and it was remarkable. Overnight, I had no problems with my knees. But I noticed today, I think I told you before we started, that I went on a day trip with some friends of mine up into the mountains here in Chiang Mai, and my knees are aching. Now, part of that might be it's a cold weather here right now, but I sense that they're sort of starting to deteriorate again, and it's really hard to accept that you can't do what you used to be able to do just a few years ago.
That's some great advice there, Barbara. I think, first thing is to accept, and then find the ways to adapt them to yourself. For
and
everybody, sorry.
And it's okay.
Okay. I think it's a
thing as you get older, you kind of become a different version of yourself, don't you? As you get older and older, and I guess as each stage of illness or a new illness steps in. It's just a matter of learning to inhabit that body and make it your own again.
Exactly. It's just life.
There you go, Mary, it's just life.
Just life, yeah.
And, if you stay grateful, I always tell myself when I sort of fall into this pity pot once in a great while, that I need to stop and focus on what I have to be grateful for. And, I get up and I look in the mirror and I say, today I'm grateful for this. And it doesn't take long before, I kind of yank myself up out of any darkness I may have slunk into.
Would you go so far as to say you feel grateful for having Lyme disease?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I will tell you something else that, I've spoken with you once before we're doing this interview, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but yesterday was my 25th year anniversary of being clean and sober.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And I almost died from drugs and alcohol too.
Wow. So
yes, I'm extremely grateful for everything that's happened in my life. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change a thing because it's made me the person I am today.
Yeah.
It's like a rebirth, I feel. It made you
kind of really look back and think about that other me,
Made you who you are today.
Yes. Now, Barbara, you are settled now, or partly settled in Thailand. So how did you get to Thailand? How did you get to be in Thailand, to stay in Thailand and have a permanent home? Would you call it that?
Oh yeah, this is my only home in the world. I guess it started because in 2002, I think it was 2002, I went to Hawaii and I was camping and I got robbed. And they slashed my tent while I was asleep in it in the middle of the night. And it was a bunch of kids that were hopped up on crystal meth. They had a really bad drug problem in those days. And they took everything. Everything. I learned a lesson. I knew enough not to climb into my tent with the light on at night, because then everyone can see the silhouette of where everything is. So the scariest thing for me was I knew I'd climbed into the tent in the dark. So how did they know where my purse was, which contained everything? Yeah. They had to have gone around the outside of the tent and felt until they felt something. And that, I look back on that and I think, my God, that must have been scary. I didn't wake up when it was happening. I woke up shortly afterwards. I think that them cutting the tent and taking my purse out is probably what woke me up.
Yeah.
But after that, and as I've said to you, I'm a person that doesn't have a lot of fear. And after that, I really had, it's kind of like, you have to get back on a horse after you fall off of it or you're never going to ride again. Mm-hmm. And I had the same sort of experience. I was kind of terrified of traveling after that. And so I thought I've got to get on the road again. I was still working at full time at the time in corporate life. And I decided I had been doing some yoga that was effectively helping with the recovery of the Lyme. And I thought, I'll look around the world and go to a yoga retreat. And so I ended up going to Thailand because one of the guys in our company had married a Thai woman, and they had an import-export business, and she spent 6 months in Thailand and 6 months in the States. And he said, well, she's over in Thailand right now. Why don't you go there and she'll show you around? And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to sort of get on the travel. So that's what I did. And she and her 2 boys spent a week with me and took me all kinds of places. And by the time a week passed, my fear was gone. And so I went directly from Bangkok with them to a tiny little town on the coast and took a long-tail boat 3 hours out into the ocean in the dark with 3 men with water leaking into the boat to an island I'd never been to. Sometimes I look back on some of the things I've done and I think, God, girl, you're crazy. And and I never experienced that fear again. But it really, Thailand, for some reason, struck a chord with me. Perhaps because I'm Buddhist. I have been Buddhist for many years, but or maybe it was because it's where I got my travel groove back.
Yeah.
I don't really know what it was about Thailand, but from the moment I set foot here, I felt like it was home. I've
Right.
had that experience in a couple of other places in my life,
Well,
Arizona and Puerto Rico. But those are the only places I ever felt connected to.
mhm.
And I knew that I would always end up here retired in Thailand. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
say retired, still working, but I'm on what's called a retirement visa here. So I can stay full time. I spent 8 years. I made a list of other potential places where I might want to settle down. And I spent 8 years going through all of them and seeing if I could find any place I like better. And I just never could. So here I am.
Was it always, or have you lived in other places in Thailand as well?
Say that again. Was it always what?
Was it always Chiang Mai, or have you lived in other places in Thailand as well?
I tried other places. I knew it was going to be Chiang Mai.
Mhm.
I was supposed to, well, let me back up and say that I didn't do this in any kind of rash fashion. I'd come back to Thailand almost every year and visited different places. I also spent 5 years wintering here before I ever rented a permanent place. So
Yeah.
the first year was a month, and the second year was 2 months, and then by year 5 it was 5 months. And I thought, God, Barbara, just rent a full-time place, you know. So I did that after 5 years of wintering, and of course it was Chiang Mai. I'd spent a couple of months in other places, and they just didn't resonate with me as much as it does up here in the north.
Mhm.
I think, frankly, I could live anywhere in the north because um, I don't know how much history your listeners would know about the Kingdom of Thailand, but it used to be two countries. It was Siam, which they'll probably think of the king and I,
Yeah.
and it was the Lana Kingdom up north here. And the Lana Kingdom and Siam merged and became Thailand. And it was at a time when the Burmese were overrunning the country and they had um, take occupied the capital, and so the king in the south said, "If you will merge with us, we'll provide you protection." So that's how Thailand became Thailand. But the Lana culture is much different than the Bangkok culture
Mhm.
or the southern culture, and you don't really understand that until you've been here a while. It helps to, learn the language, know a little bit about the costumes. Up here in the north, it's what we call sabai sabai, easy, easy, gentle, gentle. You know, don't worry
Gentle.
about don't worry about anything. Don't worry, be happy. So it's I don't think I could live in Bangkok. It's too busy. It's too commercial. It's too crowded. It's got too much traffic. I got to be in the north.
Yeah.
So are you now permanent resident? Are you a Thai? Do you get to travel a lot from Thailand? And are you accepted there by the community as a permanent in Thailand?
In general, there
Or
are
with
something
citizenship?
there's something like 75,000 Americans living here in Thailand.
Ah, okay.
So it's not unusual. We also have Brits and other Europeans and Australians, and now we're getting a lot of people from Hong Kong and China. So it's a very multicultural place, which of course I love. And yes, in general, the Thai people are very accepting of what they call them Farang, which is their word for foreigner. It's not an insult. And we of course refer to ourselves as expats. And I think that I guess the best answer to your question as to whether or not I've been accepted, I spent today on a day tour with 8 Thai friends, and um, there some people come here and they retire because, especially the men, they want to meet a young Thai girl that maybe they can marry or have on their
Mm-hmm.
arm, and they want the warm weather and the cheap prices and the easy lifestyle. but then they are constantly complaining about Thailand and the Thais. And I mean, I can't tell you, it's vitriolic in some cases. The other way is the way I've chosen, is you can spend your entire life grousing and groaning about it, or you can just accept it and enjoy it. And I mean, it's the tropics. They don't have, a lot of the buildings are kind of in bad repair, and it's the mold gets into everything. And if you don't take care of buildings, and there's a lot of things that you could complain about here, but the good parts of Thailand are so overwhelmingly good that why don't you just say, well, that's just the way it is, and not worry about it. So I feel that way, and so I tend not to spend a lot of my time with expats, because I find in a lot of cases they are just grumbling and negative, and I don't want that in my life. So most of my friends here are Thai.
It sounds like the same sort of mindset that helps you get through chronic illness has set you up for lots of different stages of your life. From
Absolutely.
Yeah, some parts of this temple might be a bit moldy and falling down, but
look how beautiful it is.
I love that. Thank you. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
What's it been like living in Chiang Mai throughout the pandemic?
We've been so lucky here.
Really?
Oh yeah. Up until must have been 3 weeks ago now, we only had 3,000 cases and 61 deaths total.
What's the population?
70 million people. So, we've all kind of tried to figure out why Thailand has escaped the bulk of it. I think that part of it is that there's no tradition for canned or boxed food full of preservatives. Everything is fresh. Everything is fresh. Much of it is organic. The Thais don't have a tradition of living together in very cramped spaces with a lot of people. I mean, it's a lot of outdoor living. Their houses are open to the outdoors in many cases. And also, we don't shake hands. We lie. Do you know what a lie is?
Show us.
I'll try. I'm trying. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no real passing of germs, and maybe it has to do with the heat or the humidity. We don't really know, but Thailand has been very fortunate, and the government has done an admirable job, I think, of handling it.
What sort of restrictions have you been living?
We initially, because Thailand was the first case outside of China.
Was it?
And there was absolute terror. Now, another thing that benefited us is the fact that in Asia, mask wearing has been the norm for years. And it hasn't been about, I don't want to catch something. I finally figured that out a few years ago when I visited Japan. And the idea in Thailand and in many other Asian countries is that the good of the whole, the good of the community is more important than the good of the individual. So if you have a cough or a sneeze, or you're not feeling quite right, or you might have a little low-grade fever, you immediately put a mask on so that you don't infect others. So the minute the pandemic hit and we had our first case, everybody in the kingdom had a mask on. I mean, overnight.
Wow.
And they didn't have to do it. And so then the government, as the cases started to mount, they did eventually do a lockdown. It was like, I can't remember, it might have been 4 weeks, maybe 3.5. Everything was closed. We could go to the market, to a grocery store, to a bank, to a doctor. Oh gosh, there was one other place. I can't think of what it was. There's like 5 or 6 places we could go, but everything was on the honor system, and that's all we needed. I mean, people were very good about it. They created an app that allowed us to check into places on our phone, so that if there was a case, it was all anonymous. It wasn't tracking us, but they had the data of who was there at the time that there was a case, and they could contact you then for your phone number. And they completely got it under control. And we went literally 5 months without a single case in the country.
Wow.
And then they opened up, but they took drastic measures. They shut down all international travel, no incoming flights at all.
Yeah.
And they didn't allow anyone to come in. For instance, I have a visa to stay here, but if I left the country, I couldn't have gotten back in.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
good.
yeah. So, I mean, they really nipped it in the bud, and they didn't have to wait for it to recur in terms of local infections. And then about 3 weeks ago, we had another outbreak. And so we're now up to 13,500 cases with 77 deaths, I think.
Yeah.
That came from the community of immigrants from Myanmar. And people are fleeing from Myanmar because the COVID is so bad there. And the government is, so screwed up there that they can't find a way to manage it. So they are coming over the border into Thailand because we abut Myanmar, and they're coming illegally, like crossing the river when no one can see them, and then avoiding the 14-day quarantine. Well, we have millions of Myanmar immigrants here, and they do jobs that the Thais don't want. They work in the fish processing industry, in the fresh markets, etc. But because they're poor and they're trying all to send money home, they live in very cramped quarters, maybe 2 people into a room, and they work morning and evening shifts, and so 2 people are sharing the same bed, 5 beds, and and on top of it, we've been told recently that the variant in Myanmar is one of the rapid spread, more infectious variants. And so it happened in the seafood industry, is where it came from.
Right.
And then we had a second outbreak in the south, where there are, I guess, hundreds of illegal gambling dens that the police were sort of turning a blind eye to and letting operate, and people were gathering in private homes that were, and
Yeah.
gambling through the night. And so those 2 things started this next outbreak, and we had 3 local transmission cases that were reported in Chiang Mai. There were rumors of another 15 or so. I don't know for sure whether that was true or rumor, but now we haven't had any more for 3 weeks. So last Wednesday we opened up again. So we're back to having our street fairs and, food
Wow.
kiosks, and yeah, we haven't.
That seems
Everybody's
unimaginable to us, because
yeah.
I'm from Kent in southeast
Right.
England, where there has been an incredibly contagious variant recently.
Right.
So I don't know. Well, we're not really planning any holidays at the moment. Certainly not any abroad. But what are your plans for the future? Do you think you'll be able to travel overseas or across borders at any time soon? And where will you go as soon as you can?
Well, I don't think it's going to be soon. But there's a silver lining in that too, because there are a lot of places in Thailand that I've always wanted to see, but I never seem to have time. When I came here, I was recovering from my travel and resting, so I didn't really want to travel. And then, when you're international, you don't really think about seeing what's in your own backyard. So since the pandemic hit, I've been to, oh my gosh, 6 or 7 places here that I've always wanted to see. Been down to see the ruins in Sukhothai and Sisa Chamalai, and been up into the mountains several times. And it's been went down to Bangkok for 8 days. I've never spent 8 days in Bangkok, but I wanted to see the Grand Palace and Wat Arun and Wat Po with no tourists. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's never again, and absolutely thrilled to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I haven't stopped traveling. I also had a whole backlog of articles that I had never had time to write on destinations around the world, and I used the time to clear that out. Well, a month ago or a month and a half ago, I wrote my last one about Armenia, Azerbaijan, I don't remember. And now I'm out of other places in the world. So it remains to be seen whether my readers are going to stick with me when now I have only Thailand to write about. And it's going to be a while because we're getting 100 million of the Chinese vaccine, which frankly I won't take because it only has a 50% efficacy. It hasn't really gone through all the human trials. I don't really trust it. But Thailand has entered into a contract to manufacture the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. So that will start in the spring, and those vaccines will be available here in May and June. So I should be able to get vaccinated, not in the first round because the frontline workers will be first.
Yeah.
The older people with underlying conditions will come before me. But I think that probably by late summer I'll be eligible because I'm 68. So even with no underlying condition, I'll be, one of the first groups.
Yeah.
And I suspect that there will be some sort of a card that we'll have to carry, just like we did for yellow fever and cholera or whatever.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think that I'm comfortable traveling internationally as long as I can get back home again. As long as the Thai government lets me, gives me the ability to come and go again. And I'm not going to fight what they say because they've done something right here. So
yes,
I'm looking at the end of the year is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, this Anna, I don't know if you've got any more questions, but it seems like a good. Yeah. Sorry.
Real quickly, my first I'm going back to Africa. I'm going to do another safari.
Right.
Yep.
Good choice.
And then, I want to do a. I've applied to claim my Canadian citizenship, and if and when that comes through, it should. I mean, I don't have to naturalize. My mother was Canadian, my grandfather was Canadian, so it's just a matter of them sending me an ID card. And if and when that happens, 3 days later, I can get my Canadian passport. And I'm going to do a celebration tour by taking a train all the way across Canada.
Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic.
That really does. Sorry, the reason I was wrapping it up there is because it seemed like a good place to finish and to give you the chance to tell everyone watching about your website and what they can find there. Certainly articles on Armenia, probably many more articles on Thailand, but I thought they might like to know about where they can find out more about you and read your writing.
Well, thank you for letting me do that. It is called Hole in the Donut because I felt like a donut for 36 years in corporate life, solid on the outside, but empty on the inside. And I named the blog in honor of that when I threw on that backpack. I've been to 100 countries, 9 non-sovereign territories, every country in Europe, and 7 continents. And so there's a whole lot of stuff to read.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do what we call listicles, the top 10 of this or the best of that, or,
Yeah.
My writing is first person narrative storytelling. So they are the stories about where I go, what happens to me when I get there, the people I meet along the way. And if people like that kind of thing, I certainly hope they'll check me out. It's holeinthedonut, DONUT.com.
Great.
And if there is anything you're writing, anything like this interview, I'm sure it is going to be infused with positivity and ways to do things and ways forward. Barbara, thank you very much for today. Can you still hear us?
Oh, we lost her.
I think we lost her, but
well, it's definitely a good place to wrap it up then.
I just wanted to say.
Go ahead, Anna.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Barbara because I think she's been wonderful. Yeah. And Barbara, have you heard us?
No, I lost you for a minute.
Oh,
you
were only saying nice things.
Oh, good.
And we wanted to say a big thank you because I think I at least feel infused with your positivity and way of doing things, and no longer finding reason not to do things, but finding reasons to do things. And yeah.
Well, everybody should go out and seize whatever joy they can find.
Even
absolutely.
Year. It's made us reassess. And I hope that there'll be a whole lot more people like me that'll look at their lives and say something is lacking, something is wanting, and just and ask themselves what is it that I love? What is it that I really want to do?
I think the pandemic will prompt a lot of people to start asking those questions more.
Right.
One of the silver linings.
Yeah, maybe some good will come of this pandemic after all. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it has. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.